I am a 28-year-old female. My tennis club meets up and plays once a week. I've made a few good friends there, all of whom are from wildly different backgrounds and age groups. One of the guys, let's call him Charles, 58-year-old male, is good friends with two of my coworkers. We're all in a niche tech field where everybody within a 3-hour radius of each other has met. We've hung out a few times in a group setting after tennis, and we get along well enough. Nothing weird. I've never gotten anything other than polite and friendly vibes from him. Charles and I are both in committed relationships. I've been seeing my boyfriend, Nate, 32-year-old male, for 3 years. Charles knows this, has met Nate, and has a live-in girlfriend of around 10 years. Her name is Sally, and she's around his age. Up until this weekend, I had never met her. Charles spends half of the month in a city about 2 hours north of the city where our tennis club is. So he only attends 2 meetups each month. I am from that city and was there visiting my parents this weekend, but they live about 30 minutes out in the suburbs. I played at a club meetup that Charles happened to be at on Saturday. We hung out, had a good time. At the end of the meetup, Charles invited me to go to a bar with him and Sally that evening. I had no plans and was not due to leave town until Sunday evening, so I happily accepted. We met up around 5 o'clock at a brewery downtown, like 3 blocks from their apartment. Nothing crazy. We were just chatting and having a nice time. Until we ordered beer number 2, that is. I started to get mildly flirty vibes from Sally when Charles went to the bathroom. She was asking me about my boyfriend and talking about how much Charles has mentioned me. I'd never met Sally before and was a little weirded out, but figured she was just like that and kind of brushed it off. All of a sudden, he gets back from the bathroom and he's all over her, grabbing her butt, fondling her breasts, rubbing up and down her arms. You get the picture. Mind you, it's 6:45 at a brewery. This isn't a nightclub. We're all on bar stools next to each other, and when they began their petting session, they also scooted closer to me. Sally proceeds to go to the bathroom, and Charles straight up caressed my shoulder while she was gone, to which I awkwardly scooted away. At this point, somehow after having 2 beers, I was feeling pretty buzzed and was about to switch to water and didn't realize they had even less than that. So I assumed they were pretty buzzed themselves. Then they finished their beers and said, "You should come over for dinner. We'd love to have you and you should probably sober up." I wasn't quite comfortable driving all the way back to my folks yet, although I was still entirely articulate and did not seem drunk. And they seemed to have calmed down a little, so I accepted the offer. We got to their apartment and they started trying to get me to go swimming with them. I declined because I didn't bring a swimsuit, and then Sally kept trying to get me to borrow one of her bikinis. At that point, my instincts were going haywire, and I resolved to make my exit sooner rather than later. After dinner around 9, I helped with the dishes and then attempted to politely make an exit, because it was plain to me what was going on at that point. They then tried to convince me to crash on their couch for the night, an offer which I politely declined. We were saying our goodbyes, and Sally said, "It's so nice to finally meet you. Charles has talked about you so much." I replied, "Yeah, I'm sure he's constantly saying things like, 'Listen to what this dumb B-teach did at the match last night.'" Charles then turned to me gravely and said, "Yeah, that you're a crazy SLT." At that point, I got out of there because it became clear things were about to escalate. This happening completely blindsided me. They are old enough to be my parents, and until that evening, I've never had a reason to believe Charles had intimacy intentions towards me. I'm not a prude and have nothing against swingers or poly people or whoever, but it's just not for me. And I'm in a committed relationship. They never went out and said, "Hey, let's FCK." And it wasn't like they had pineapples all over their apartment. So I would suppose that there's still some plausible deniability, but not much at all. Part of me wonders if they misread my intent when I agreed to have dinner with them, but I don't know how they could possibly have done that. I was never flirty or suggestive, and in fact, actively displayed my discomfort with them after dinner. However, I would be lying if I said that the events of this weekend didn't make me a little uncomfortable. We're all adults and they weren't rappy, so it's really all water under the bridge. I was planning to act as if nothing happened and just not hang out with Charles one-on-one, as to not give him the wrong idea. Now for an update. My boss just let me know this afternoon that our companies are about to start a long-term collaborative project that would involve Charles and me working and traveling together. Plus, We're doubles partners at the club meetup tomorrow. Do I just act like nothing happened? That was truly one of the strangest nights of my life, and I'm entirely out of my depth. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. It was not my finest moment in terms of critical thinking skills. However, you hit the nail on the head regarding the naivety, I believe. That's the part that makes me hesitate about working with him in the future. Not that he's some sort of predator or anything, but I don't want to give him any incorrect ideas. Comment 2. Yes, he's met Charles several times and really likes him. Both of us are taken aback by this. At first, he became protective and offered to confront Charles about it. But neither of us think that would be productive in any way. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all your comments on my last post. So, the day after I posted, I went to the tennis club meetup. I was dreading it because Charles and I were doubles partners, and I had no idea how to act around him after what happened. I decided to just be professional and keep things strictly about tennis. When I got there, Charles greeted me like nothing had happened, which was a bit of a relief but also confusing. We played our match and it was fine, but I could feel the tension. I kept my distance and avoided any unnecessary conversation. After the match, I was packing up my stuff when Charles approached me. He asked if we could talk for a minute. I was hesitant, but agreed. He apologized for the previous night, saying they had too much to drink and things got out of hand. He assured me that it wouldn't happen again and hoped we could move past it. I nodded and said I appreciated the apology, but inside, I was still uneasy. The next day at work, I had a meeting with my boss about the upcoming project with Charles. I was nervous, but decided to be upfront about my concerns. I told my boss that I had some personal issues with Charles and wasn't sure if I could work with him effectively. My boss was understanding and asked if I wanted to be reassigned. I thought about it, but realized that avoiding the situation wouldn't solve anything. I decided to give it a shot and see how things went, but I made it clear that I would speak up if there were any issues. That evening, I got a call from Sally. I was surprised and almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. She apologized for her behavior and said she felt terrible about making me uncomfortable. She explained that they were going through a rough patch and were trying to spice things up, but it was a mistake to involve me. I appreciated her honesty and told her that while I understood, I wasn't interested in being part of their dynamic. She said she respected that and hoped we could still be friendly. The following day, Charles and I had our first project meeting. It was awkward at first, but we managed to keep things professional. As the day went on, I noticed that Charles was making an effort to keep things strictly business. It made me feel a bit more at ease, but I was still cautious. We had to travel to a client site the next day, and I was dreading the long car ride with him. During the drive, we talked about work and the project, avoiding any personal topics. It was a bit tense, but manageable. At one point, Charles brought up the previous weekend again, saying he felt terrible about how things went down. He reiterated that it wouldn't happen again and hoped we could move forward. I told him that while I appreciated the apology, it would take time for me to feel completely comfortable around him again. He said he understood and would give me the space I needed. When we got to the client site, we had a busy day of meetings and presentations. It was a good distraction, and I was able to focus on work. By the end of the day, I felt a bit more at ease. On the drive back, we talked more about the project and our plans for the next few weeks. It felt like we were starting to find a new normal, but I was still cautious. Back at the office, things started to settle into a routine. Charles and I worked together on the project, and while it was still a bit awkward, we managed to keep things professional. I made sure to set clear boundaries and kept our interactions strictly about work. It was exhausting, but I felt like I was handling it as best as I could. One evening, Nate and I were having dinner, and I decided to tell him about everything that had happened. I was nervous about how he would react, but I felt like he needed to know. He was shocked and a bit angry at first, but he appreciated my honesty. We talked about it for a long time, and he reassured me that he trusted me and supported my decision to keep working on the project. It was a huge relief to have his support, and it made me feel more confident about handling the situation. A few days later, I had a conversation with one of my coworkers, who was also friends with Charles. I didn't go into details, but I mentioned that things had been a bit weird between us lately. My coworker said that Charles had been going through some personal issues and had been acting out of character. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it gave me some context. It made me realize that everyone has their own struggles, and sometimes people make mistakes. As the weeks went on, things started to improve. Charles and I found a way to work together without any issues, and the project was going well. I still kept my distance and maintained clear boundaries, but I felt more at ease. I also made an effort to focus on my own well-being, spending time with Nate and doing things that made me happy. Looking back, it was a challenging experience, but I feel like I handled it as best as I could. It taught me a lot about setting boundaries and standing up for myself. I'm still cautious around Charles, but I feel more confident in my ability to navigate difficult situations. Thanks for reading. Aita for telling my parents to stop spoiling my kids and causing a family meltdown. I am a 32-year-old female married to a 33-year-old male. We have 2 children, ages 6 months and 2 years old. Both of our children are adopted from a family member on my husband's side. None of my siblings have any children. My sister is trying to get treatment, but I don't know how that will go. Both of my brothers don't really want children. So my babies are the only grandbabies at the moment. My husband's brother also does not have any children yet, though he and his wife are planning on trying. My parents spoil my children endlessly. It started with the oldest. He came from a very bad situation, and the family, my husband and myself included, wanted him to have better, so we did spoil him a lot. However, it was like normal spoiling. A gift every now and then, new room stuff every now and then, etc. However, with my parents, if they want something, they get it. They could do no wrong in the eyes of my parents. I'm sure they are my parents, but they are completely different people than the parents I grew up with. The parents I grew up with were no BS type people, and my parents now are let them get away with unalive type people. Nearly every weekend, my parents are picking up the kids to go somewhere. Sometimes I get like 10 minutes warning that they will be coming by to get the kids. They've taken them to the mountains. They've taken them to Disney. They are at the beach this weekend. It's wild. Camping when I was growing up was a tent in the backyard. We didn't get this. I've never been to Disney, and the only time I've been to the mountains was my honeymoon. The beach isn't that crazy. It's only an hour's drive, but my parents firmly believe in taking them everywhere. Though I do believe the experience is good and memories and stuff, I still think it's a bit much. I've even had to take my parents off of the school pickup because my dad would go get my son and take him for ice cream and stuff all the time. I had to seriously crack down on the random pickups. My sister isn't any better. She will randomly swing by in the evenings and pick them up to go do something. She buys them stuff all the time. My husband's parents are a little better on not randomly taking them, but they tend to just buy tons of presents all the time as well. When I say my kids are getting spoiled rotten, I mean it. I'm trying to crack down on the kids being so spoiled. They have all of the electronics courtesy of my parents and my husband's. They have tons of toys that they never play with. They have pretty much everything a kid could want. It bothers me because they don't really seem to appreciate it. They seem to think that they should have it and are entitled to it. I don't want my children to feel as though they are entitled to everything. However, it seems like no matter what I do, someone gets whatever they want for them. I know they are still young enough to fix this, but I don't seem to have a whole lot of backing here from family. I'm not sure what to do about it at all. TLDR, my family is spoiling my kids, and I'm trying to get them to stop so I don't have overly entitled kids. But I have no support here, and I'm not sure what to do. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, and any gift that you don't want in your house is donated or sold, and the funds put into an account for the kids. Why don't they set up a savings account for the kids and throw money in there when they want to buy something? This is such a waste of money that could benefit the kids in the future. Comment 2. Advice I've heard about toys. If the kid cannot tidy up their own stuff and put it away in 5 minutes, with appropriate help if they're under 6 or so each day, then they have too much, and stuff should be rotated out or donated to make it manageable. Now for the update, thanks for reading my last post. So, a lot has happened in the past 3 months, and it's been a mix of new events, fallout from those events, and some backstory that has come to light. First off, my parents' spoiling reached a new level. They decided to surprise the kids with a trip to Europe. Yes, Europe. They didn't even ask us. They just showed up one morning with plane tickets and suitcases packed for the kids. My husband and I were furious. We had a huge argument with them, and it got pretty heated. My mom said they just wanted to give the kids experiences they never had growing up. But I told her that they were overstepping boundaries. My dad tried to calm things down, but it was clear that they didn't see the problem. We ended up not letting the kids go, which caused a lot of tension. This argument led to some fallout. My parents were really hurt and didn't talk to us for a couple of weeks. During that time, my husband and I had to deal with the kids, asking why they couldn't go on the trip. It was hard to explain to a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old why they couldn't go to Europe when their grandparents had promised them. We tried to make it up to them by planning a small family trip to a nearby amusement park, but it wasn't the same in their eyes. Then, my sister decided to get involved. She thought we were being too harsh on our parents and took it upon herself to make things right. She started taking the kids out even more frequently, buying them even more stuff. One evening, she took them to a fancy restaurant without telling us. When we found out, we had another big argument. She accused us of being ungrateful and said that we were depriving the kids of a happy childhood. It was a mess. In the midst of all this, my husband's brother and his wife announced that they were expecting a baby. This should have been a joyous occasion, but it added another layer of complexity. My in-laws started shifting their attention to the upcoming grandchild, which made my kids feel left out. They didn't understand why they weren't the center of attention anymore, and it led to some behavioral issues. My 2-year-old started throwing tantrums, and the baby became more clingy. We also found out some backstory that explained a lot of my parents' behavior. My mom confided in me that she and my dad had always felt guilty about not being able to provide more for us when we were kids. They had struggled financially and couldn't afford to give us the experiences they wanted to. Now that they were more financially stable, they were trying to make up for it with their grandkids. It was a revelation that made me see things from their perspective, but it didn't make it any easier to deal with the current situation. My husband and I decided to take a different approach. We sat down with my parents and my sister and had a long, heartfelt conversation. We explained that while we appreciated their generosity, it was important for the kids to learn the value of things and not take everything for granted. We suggested setting some boundaries, like limiting the number of outings and gifts. Surprisingly, they agreed, but it was clear that it would take time for everyone to adjust. During this time, I also had to confront some internal conflicts. I realized that part of my frustration stemmed from my own childhood. I had always felt that my parents were too strict and didn't give us enough freedom. Now, seeing them be so lenient with my kids brought up a lot of unresolved feelings. I had to work through these emotions and understand that my parents were doing what they thought was best, even if it wasn't always the right approach. As for my husband's parents, they were more understanding. They agreed to tone down the gift-giving and focus more on spending quality time with the kids. This helped a lot, and we started seeing some positive changes in the kids' behavior. They became more appreciative of the things they had and started valuing the time spent with family more than the material gifts. But before I tell you more about that, there's another layer to this story. My sister's treatment wasn't going well, and it was taking a toll on her emotionally. She admitted that spoiling the kids was her way of coping with her own struggles. She felt that by making the kids happy, she could find some happiness for herself. This was a heartbreaking revelation, and it made me realize that everyone was dealing with their own issues in different ways. We decided to support my sister more, helping her through her treatment and being there for her emotionally. This brought us closer as a family and helped us understand each other better. It also made me more empathetic towards her actions, even if I didn't always agree with them. In the end, we found a balance. My parents and sister still spoil the kids, but it's more controlled now. We've set boundaries that everyone respects, and the kids are learning to appreciate the things they have. It's not perfect, but it's a work in progress. Thanks for reading. Aita for suggesting divorce. After my wife smashed my laptop and her dad called me an abuser. A 39-year-old male and my wife, 38-year-old female, have been married for 3 years but have known each other since childhood. I normally work out of town most of the time, working long hours, but I have been off work for about 8 months. Our relationship has shifted for me, because we continue to have the same problems over and over. In my eyes, if she does something that I don't like, I bring it up in hopes of having a discussion. However, she instantly gets defensive and downplays what I feel is an issue. When it's the other way around and I have done something wrong, it's easy for me to understand, and I apologize and explain to her how I'm going to try and make sure it doesn't happen again, therefore avoiding an argument. But when she is in the wrong, it can turn into a 2+ hour argument, and it ends up not being resolved with weak apologies, only for her to repeat the behavior a day or two later. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect. When we get really heated, we both yell, and sometimes I call her names, which I regret and apologize for. I've worked on refraining from name-calling, as that was what she requested of me, and it has vastly improved. Recently, we were having issues once again, and I told her that I'm not happy in the relationship anymore, and I was considering a divorce. Well, she blew up and became very angry. I tried to reason with her to calm down, but it was unsuccessful. I did raise my voice, however. I respectfully did not call her any names and tried to keep my cool as much as possible. When I realized there was no way to communicate successfully, I told her I'm going for a drive to calm down, and I did. She called me about 15 times, and I finally parked and answered. She told me she's sorry and agreed to my request that she be more respectful. So I proceeded back home. However, she instantly went back to yelling and being extremely disrespectful. I'd already calmed down, so I asked her to go somewhere so I could have some time to myself. She drove away and came back with her parents. Her dad came in, aggressively calling me an abuser, and told me to leave the house that we both owned together. Well, no one disrespects me in my own home, so I raised my voice, telling him to leave. We were sort of yelling back and forth because he refused to leave, so my wife picked up my laptop and slammed it on the ground, smashing it to pieces. Then she proceeded to call the police, and her father attempted to taunt me to get physical. I did not fall for this at all. So I removed myself to a different room of the house. At this point, I realized that I just need to be calm and stay away. My wife tried to continue to talk to me, and all I would respond was calmly and politely, "I will have a discussion with you when your parents have left." Eventually, they did, and my wife decided to be calm. We had a long, calm discussion about what had happened, and that I am in fact not an aggressor. He meant mentally hurtful for calling her names in the past, as I have never put a finger on my wife before, not even threatened it. But I have heard her father call her names when he was upset, and even her own mother was called names when her father was upset. So he has totally done the same things, yet I am a monster for it, and he is not. We agreed to stay calm and reevaluate everything in a week, but I can't get it out of my head. Today I realized that where she slammed my laptop on the ground has ruined the floor. The laptop was a $3,000 laptop, and repairing the vinyl plank flooring won't be cheap, as the hole she made is in the middle of the room. I can't seem to even imagine getting over this. I can never go to her parents' house for any family functions again, and I won't let them into my home ever again. I don't know if there is any way to come back from this. I need advice. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Do you have children? I would probably tell her she has 2 options. 1, we can separate, and you can attend therapy as well as anger management. We can attend couples therapy together until I feel I can communicate with you in a reasonable manner and be heard, not met with hostility and my property damaged. 2, we can divorce and go our own way. Comment 2. This is what I tell people. If someone came to you with this story, what would you tell them to do? Be objective and take the emotion out of the scenario. And there's your answer. Clearly, trust and the relationship between you, your wife, and now your in-laws is potentially beyond repair. Now, for the update, thanks for all the comments from my last post. So, here's what's been happening over the past 3 months. After that big blow-up with my wife and her parents, things were tense, to say the least. We tried to stick to our agreement to stay calm and reevaluate everything in a week. But honestly, it felt like we were just walking on eggshells around each other. I was still fuming about my laptop and the floor, and she was acting like nothing had happened. I tried to bring it up a couple of times, but she just brushed it off, saying it was an accident and that I should let it go. It was hard to just let it go, though, especially since I was the one who had to deal with the repairs. About a month after the incident, I made a mistake that changed everything. I was still feeling pretty bitter about the whole situation, and I ended up confiding in a coworker about what had happened. I didn't think much of it at the time, but word got around, and before I knew it, people at work were talking about my personal life. My wife found out through a mutual friend, and she was livid. She accused me of airing our dirty laundry and making her look bad. I tried to explain that I just needed someone to talk to, but she wasn't having it. This led to another huge argument, and this time, it felt like there was no coming back from it. In the fallout of that argument, my wife decided she needed some space and went to stay with her parents for a while. This was a relief in some ways because it gave me some time to think, but it also made me realize how much I missed her. I started to question whether I had been too harsh and if maybe I should have handled things differently. But before I could reach out to her, I got served with divorce papers. It felt like a punch to the gut. I knew things were bad, but I didn't think they were that bad. As I was dealing with the shock of the divorce papers, I started to reflect on our relationship and how we got to this point. I remembered how we used to be so close, how we would talk for hours about everything and nothing. But somewhere along the way, we lost that connection. I think a lot of it had to do with my job and being away so much. When I was home, I was always tired and stressed, and I guess I took it out on her more than I realized. She, on the other hand, had her own issues. She never really learned how to communicate effectively, and her default response to any conflict was to get defensive and shut down. I also started to think about her parents and their influence on her. Growing up, she was always trying to please them, especially her dad. He was a tough man, always demanding perfection, and never really showing any affection. I think that's why she has such a hard time dealing with criticism. She sees it as a personal attack rather than an opportunity to grow. And when her dad called me an aggressor, it was like he was projecting his own issues onto me. It made me realize that she's been dealing with a lot more than I ever knew. But before I tell you more about that, let me get back to what happened next. After getting the divorce papers, I decided to fight for our marriage. I reached out to her and asked if we could go to counseling. She was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. We started seeing a therapist, and it was eye-opening for both of us. We learned a lot about each other and ourselves. I realized that I needed to be more patient and understanding, and she learned that she needed to be more open and honest about her feelings. However, just when I thought we were making progress, I made another mistake. I was supposed to meet her for a counseling session, but I got caught up at work and completely forgot. By the time I remembered, it was too late. She was furious and felt like I wasn't taking our therapy seriously. This led to another argument, and she decided to move forward with the divorce. In the end, the divorce was finalized, and we went our separate ways. It was a tough pill to swallow, but I've come to accept it. I've learned a lot from this experience, and I'm trying to take those lessons with me as I move forward. I still miss her, and I wish things could have been different, but I know that I can't change the past. All I can do is try to be a better person and hope that one day I'll find happiness again. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.